इसमें choice of language is English or Urdu or both?
It is English. I was told because I asked specifically. Oh, it's live now. So hello, my name is Shamsi, and thank you for joining us for the PAK-U.S Alumni Network Talks. And today we're talking about protecting animal rights. And as we know, the case that has gotten international, has been talked about internationally and nationally is the case of Kaavan, the elephant, the 30-year-old elephant, that was taken up by American pop singer Cher as well, and lots of advocacy groups. We have a few really amazing people with us on the panel who've taken the lead on this, whether it is in terms of care, whether in terms of finding Kaavan a home, as well as in court. But I'd also like to sort of open and talk about an example of how this is not just about one elephant. A few years ago, I visited the Peshawar District Commissioner office, and there was a stuffed zebra in one of the corridors. And I asked about it because it seemed very out of place in that environment. And I was told that this was zebra had been gifted by the Punjab government, had died in captivity in the Peshawar Zoo, was stuffed and, I don't know, just presented as a sort of trophy in the district commissioner's office. And I thought it was almost a sort of, in a sense, a symbol of cruelty. I mean, I don't know, but that's, we're going to be talking about a lot in this session. We're going to talk about how advocacy works. We're going to talk about animal rights, lack of laws in Pakistan, what the courts have done, what they can do, what the parliament can do, and what the way forward is, how we can take this to improve animal rights and their safety and care in Pakistan. So let me just introduce the panel. First of all, we have Dr. Amir Khalil joining us from Lebanon. He's the director of project development for Paws International, which is sort of the lead for the Kaavan rescue operation. We also have let me just skip. Yes, we also have Arieb, Azhar, needs no introduction, musician, producer, director, you know, has been a pioneer of the performing arts as well, and friend of animals everywhere. We also have Daniyal, who is a lawyer and has been advocating in court. In fact, he had a hearing today as well on this case as well. We have Dr. Rehman, who's the chairman of the Islamabad Wildlife Management Board, and he is also the chief executive officer of the Himalayan Wildlife Foundation. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I think first of all, Dr. Amir, I would like to start with you. It took a court order for Kaavan to finally find a home. Walk us through what's going to happen next.
At first, thanks for this opportunity. Thanks for having me also. Thanks for organizing this important event. Regarding Islamabad Zoo, Paws came to work together with wildlife management to evacuate, based on the court order, the remaining captive animal at Islamabad Zoo. So Kaavan is one of 37 animals. When we arrive, we are busy to relocate. Kaavan is a special case because he is a very big boy. He's really, I will say, a giant boy. He's male. He's over 35 years. And sure, to find a unique place for him, this is a big effort. He is over 5.5 tons. He was really lonely for many years together, alone, after he lost his partner. He has psychological problem. He have weight problem. He have health problem with his nails. How when we came, and he was aggressive. The elephant was bored. So when the court decided to evacuate or to find a suitable place for Kaavan, we were looking for a place for him in Pakistan, but we find he is the only and the last Asian elephant. So even there is a sanctuary for him, he will live alone. And thanks, we find through the cooperation with Free the Wild, the place in Cambodia. It's a sanctuary, and now we are working together for the relocation plan for Kaavan. But this is a giant or a mammoth work, really, because it's a huge logistic effort, and everything should be very precise for the future of Kaavan.
Could you explain why this is taking him? Sorry, taking him out of the country is so difficult? What are the sort of logistics involved?
So Kaavan is 5.5 tons. He is living in an enclosure. This enclosure is not prepared at all from safety measure for a protected contact, which means Kaavan is a wild animal. He easily will kill with his weight any person will come near to him. So this is the first challenge. To dart such an elephant, you need to move 5.5 tons if he sleep, and it's very dangerous for elephant. So we don't have the luxury to dart this elephant and to put him down on the ground. To move this elephant, you need special machine and the heavy machine which is able to do this. To find a proper aeroplane, the only aeroplane can take such an elephant currently is Antonov. It is the biggest aeroplane on our planet, which can take such type of animal. So it is the biggest movement maybe ever happen with such big elephant. Before they move elephant, but young elephant. The other challenge is sure to move an elephant like this in the air. It's a huge logistic work. The pressure of the airplane. If the elephant move inside an airplane one step, left or right, back or forth, this would be nightmare to any pilot. 5.5 tons beside a crate or a transport box with the same weight nearly, which speak about 11 tons, to move one step in front and back. So it's really, it is a very, very precise mission. To move the elephant outside the zoo, you need a special truck, which will not be able to enter to the zoo due to the vegetation of the landscape. You need a professional team to have qualified persons who are able for any emergency. Imagine you are in an airplane and the air pressure go down. You have the oxygen mask fall down for human. For elephants, you need special preparation. The elephant needs to eat 250 kilogram food per day. He needs to drink 200 liter water. His urine in airplane, how to evacuate it. So really, it is, I would say, a nightmare. But I think I have a very good team.
Is this also a unique sort of incident where an elephant is, in a sense, immigrating?
I think it is a history, because we believe at first the elephant, he is an elephant and he deserves to live an elephant. And we hope Kaavan will be pensioned and retired and to be with other elephants in the future. This is what we are hoping for. But we think this is a unique mission due to the size of the elephant, due to the destination where he is going, and the best of Kaavan. Kaavan was not prepared for this. We are working over 8 weeks now together with the Wildlife Management Board to prepare Kaavan for this important trip. I will say the final trip for him.
All right, thank you. Dr. Anis, I'll sort of come to you now. If you could unmute your mic. The question here is, I mean, this is not just about one elephant, as I said. There have been many reported incidents of animals that have been treated badly at the Islamabad Zoo. So the question is, who is supervising the animals? Who is taking care of them? Under what law? Why has this been allowed to continue?
The Islamabad Zoo, which is a 45-year-old zoo, like everything else in Islamabad, everything was managed by the Capital Development Authority for many, many years. There was no Wildlife Management Board until the last 4 or 5 years. And they were managing everything. And their expertise, as you can imagine, it's a development authority. It is their job to make sectors and roads and bridges. But because there was no other body here, so this was a responsibility that they kept with themselves. About 5 years ago, the Municipal Corporation of Islamabad was established by law, and it was handed over to them. So they continued with the same staff and the same animals. Now, principally, it's in a very beautiful location, which all people from Islamabad realize that it's a and Dr. Amir Khalil actually told me that this location is better than most locations, even in Europe. It is such a pretty location. But because if you don't have professional zookeepers, you don't have people who care for animals, so what happens is that you see animals have a life, average animals, birds will be even less than that, but we have a life of 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, 20 years. So animals come to zoos to die. Okay, so that is the end result of every animal. If it will die of disease or uncared for, that will be even earlier. Otherwise, it will live its life and it will die. So what happens in a zoo like Islamabad, which is not managed professionally, is that you have a cage that is built for a wolf, and the wolf will die after some years. And then you suddenly find that we don't have a wolf, but we have a bear. So we said, oh, that's an empty cage, so let's put the bear in that cage. So then the bear starts living in that cage, and then something happens to the bear, and then you say, oh, we have got 6 zebras. Oh, that's the empty cage. Okay, we put. So, आप समझ गए ना, what I'm trying to say is that there is no professional thinking, there is no professional care that goes behind them. But please remember, this is no different from any other government department. I mean, it's not that these people are terrible in this and they're fantastic in anything else.
One could argue though that, I mean, then what you're trying to say is no different from a government department, but there's a difference between animals and bureaucrats, surely.
Very little. Very little. Animals are
so could I also ask another question here? In terms of funding, is it how underfunded is it, and how understaffed is the Islamabad Zoo?
Okay, so I'll tell you where I left off. So this is the history of the Islamabad Zoo, that the animals have been put into cages and enclosures that were probably none of them is suitable. And you heard Dr. Amir Khalil say that this elephant is in an enclosure which is really not suitable for him at all. So that is the situation of the animals in the zoo. Then coming to the staff, these are staff who are just hired as cleaners and sweepers and, managers of the zoo. None of them has any professional zookeeping experience. So for the first time, about a year ago when this court case started, we found out that, there is a professional zookeeper who lives in Islamabad. The first time in 40 years. A professional zookeeper, a young lady by the name of Katie, she came and she started telling us what is a zookeeper. They never knew. And then, we had training sessions. We tried to educate these people who work. So it's just that aapke ghar ka mulazim, mere ghar ka mulazim, his duty is today to work in the zoo. So that's what he starts doing. He just goes in the morning and he throws the food in. Sweeper comes and cleans it and he just throws the food in. And that is all that this zoo was doing. Talking of funding, they have funding for the food. Now, the food is a standard food that, they would ask the Lahore Zoo or they would ask the Karachi Zoo, how do you feed your animals? And, they all compare notes and they say, oh, this is what we feed our animals. So, this is a specialized field, where you have a professional zoo veterinarian who will advise you that this is the sort of food at this age of the animal, and then at this age, he will be fed this, and this age, at a later age, he will be fed this. So, this is professional that Dr. Amir Khalil and his team came and they educate us on these things, which we never knew before. I mean, the Wildlife Management Board has had the last 3 months only, but this is what we learned. So the food was taken care of all along. The food was taken care of, but the funding relating to the enclosures. Now, when we went to the court, because you see, the court has been hearing this case for 1.5 years. And I can tell you that everything here rests on the shoulder of just one person, and that is the Chief Justice of the Islamabad High Court. It is his direction, his advice, and he has taken the law to make this happen. It's not me, it's nobody else who could do this except by the law. Now,
Dr. Adis, I'm going to stop you here and I will come back to you, but I think that's a nice segue and we can ask Daniyal Hassan now to sort of weigh in on, the court case. I mean, I always think it's shocking that we have to go to court for things like this, Daniyal. But could you walk us through the case, Dr. Athar's, Manila's judgment? And I know, I think just when we were offline, you also told me that there was another hearing today.
Yes, so first of all, let's start with the rather good news that came in from today's hearing, and that is the Ministry of Climate Change has finally granted an export permit for the 2 brown bears to be exported to a sanctuary abroad where they can at least live the rest of their lives peacefully. So that is something very positive, and it has taken a lot of effort by Dr. Anis, myself, and the court as well to get the ministry to do this. But it's all it's done now. So let's now the process remains as Dr. Amir Khalil explained about moving the bears as well as Kaavan. So this case started last year in 2019, and there were a number of petitions by different concerned citizens on the condition of animals at the Islamabad Zoo. There was a specific petition for Kaavan, and there was a petition for the issue of stray dogs in Pakistan. They were all sort of clubbed together and heard together by the Chief Justice. And during the course of the hearings, a lot of interesting things came forward. For instance, the court was informed that the meat that was supposed to be given to the animals was actually served at the homes of public officials, and which is outrageous. But I mean, unfortunately, this is what it is. But after almost a year long, a year of hearings, multiple directions, commitments from the Ministry of Climate Change, as well as the Capital Development Authority and the Metropolitan Corporation Islamabad, finally a landmark judgment came out, which was authored by Chief Justice Atta Minallah of the Islamabad High Court. And what, in a nutshell, it does is gives the rights which are enshrined in the Constitution of Pakistan to animals. Now, one could argue that the rights enshrined in the Constitution of Pakistan were meant to be for human beings, but it is the judicial mind of Chief Justice Athar Minallah and his interpretation, which he derived from other sources as well, through which the court was able to extend the rights to the animals within Pakistan, and especially in Islamabad Zoo. And
Daniyal, could you sort of walk us through the interpretation and the arguments that the Chief Justice of the Islamabad High Court gave in his judgment? Because you think, how can you extend human rights to animal rights?
Yeah. So number one, in his judgment, Chief Justice Atta Minallah has cited the international legal commitments that the state of Pakistan has made on the protection of wildlife and wildlife species, right? And one of the conventions which Pakistan has signed is the Convention on International Trade on Endangered Flora and Fauna. And there are multiple other conventions which prohibit and which ban the trade of wildlife. And Pakistan is not only a signatory to some of those conventions. Pakistan has also ratified them, which means that those the rights available under those conventions and the prohibitions made under those conventions are now a part of the Pakistani law. So number one, that was the point that was made in the judgment. Number two, Chief Justice Atta Minallah quoted the Holy Quran as well as sayings of the Holy Prophet to enlighten the people of this country that animals have rights. And then he went on to explain that how a society which does not care for its animals is burdened with so many different catastrophes and dilemmas. So I think it makes an excellent read, and it is one of the reasons that the judgment is now being cited in many international jurisdictions, and including specifically the Supreme Court of New York State, where this judgment has been cited in a case.
Could you just quickly tell us which case this judgment was cited in the jurisdiction of New York?
Well, I don't have the case at the back of my head right now.
But what is clear is that this is unprecedented, and this actually is being quoted internationally as well.
I mean, it's the first time in the history of Pakistan that such a judgment has been pronounced, and in a lot of other jurisdictions as well, because constitutions of most countries were not made thinking about animal rights. I mean, a lot of the constitutions are lacking in granting so many fundamental human rights, so let alone animal rights. So this is, I think, one step in the international interpretation of rights, which can be extended to now all living beings. There is no distinction left between humans and animals. Now the judgment talks about living beings.
All right, I'm going to stop you and I'm going to include Arieb in the conversation as well. First of all, thank you so much, Arieb. And I noticed that you went to calm Kaavan down as well and were singing to him. Just tell us about that first, and then we'll talk about more substantial things.
Thanks, Amber. Please.
I am proud, and I think he is a good singer. This I have to say before he starts.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amir. That's the only reason I'm here, because there are so many people in Pakistan who are doing so much for animal rights, and I'm basically an artist. I've been, in arts and culture. So I'm very indebted to my dear friend Hania Tariq, who's been working with Paws, who told me about Kaavan's story. And I'd been reading some of its snippets on the news, but I wasn't really following closely until she told me about it. And then she said that there's this plan to have him shifted, but there's also some people in the country who think that it's anti-Pakistan. If we shift this elephant out of Pakistan, it gives Pakistan a bad image, which is ridiculous because it actually shows Pakistan in a great image. The fact that the Islamabad High Court gave such a ruling, which can be cited internationally, and the fact that we can show people across the world that we are prepared to think about not just the vulnerable sections of our human society, but also about every other species that lives in Pakistan. We are prepared to start taking some responsibility. I think it's a historic move. So Hania told me that it would be so good if we could get a bit of a social media campaign going and get people involved. And that, of course, I arrived there. First day I came and saw Kaavan behind the cage. I mean, it's just a magnificent animal. And the second day when I came, Dr. Amir was there, and I saw the bond and the connection between Dr. Amir and Kaavan, and that just simply brought tears to my eyes because I know, and I mean, he's right here in front of me, but I truly believe Dr. Amir to be a saint amongst us, the way he behaves with the animals. And Dr. Rehman, of course, for years has been doing such brilliant work here. So I arrived there, and I was surprised when Dr. Amir called me inside the enclosure. I'd read in the news also that Dr. Amir Khalil likes to sing Frank Sinatra's My Way to Kaavan. And that's a song that I've been singing on my guitar for a while. So I came and sang a couple of songs, and it was just a truly magnificent moment because at one point, Kaavan reached across with his trunk and he just gently kissed me on the face. And it was just a magical meeting, and that video sort of went viral, and I'm glad it brought a lot of attention to this much needed.
That sort of actually does bring me to my next question, because I think in terms of advocacy, awareness about animal rights as well, people like yourself, celebrities, artists, they step in. I mean, with Kaavan, it was Cher, and I remember in 2016. When this gained a lot of media attention as well. I was working with Dawn at the time, and we raised this in our show as well. But it took a really big celebrity, international celebrity, who also thanked the Islamabad High Court and the Prime Minister of Pakistan when that judgment came as well. But we also seen, for instance, the case of the bear in Karachi Zoo as well. There were a lot of celebrities who were talking about it, and suddenly this came to their attention. But that's not consistent. We can't just react to stories that come to light. Could you talk a little about how perhaps the celebrities who are much more active in terms of following these stories or advocating for animal rights?
Well, generally I've noticed celebrities, I don't know, artists. I think mostly artists are involved either in their own work, or if they're celebrities, then they're involved in their own fame. But I think it's very important for people who have large followings to raise these issues for human rights and for animal rights. I strongly and passionately believe that until we learn to coexist with all the other species on this planet, we won't learn to coexist with each other either. It is dependent. And we are now, of course, with all the knowledge that we possess, now it's been proven that we are part of this ecosystem, and each and every piece, each and every living organism of this ecosystem is as important as we are. And I think now there is a growing awareness about this around the world. In our part of the world, I'd just like to say that, 2,000 years ago, we read in our history when there was the time of Emperor Ashok Maurya. During that time, they say that he had built not only free hospitals all along the highways, but he had built free veterinary clinics all along the highways where you could bring in any animal that was injured. Now, if an enlightened emperor 2,000 years ago could have this vision, I think it's very much now the time that we revive this sensibility. And zoos are now just ridiculous across the world. Now zoos are, people are coming. If you want to watch what an animal looks like, just watch a documentary of David Attenborough. There's so much on the internet available. But to go to a place and see an animal behind a cage, it just shows what we have become. And I think that it's the opportunity now to not only to show to the world, but to educate ourselves. Now there's now that the Islamabad Zoo is going to be, I don't know, turned into some other sort of a space. I think it's an opportunity where we could use that space to show real interaction with animals and really use it as a place.
I'm going to take that question actually, because I think this is an important, as you said, because that conversation is happening all over the world, whether zoos are places for animals. How do we keep them? How do we care for them? But I think it's important right now. So Dr. Anis, if you could answer that question, I mean, do we need to completely rethink the Islamabad Zoo, bring it more in line with international best practices, for instance, 208 cages, just rethink it? I mean, as you said, it's a beautiful location. Let them run free.
Yeah. You see, what you have to understand, I think, like Arieb said, that I think the understanding has come to people that everything, these are all blocks of life that all belong in one large mosaic. These are all parts of it. But the thing to understand is that when you take that piece of mosaic out of this picture, you cannot put it back. This is very important to understand. When an animal is removed, it cannot go back. I'll give you an example. About just over a year ago, a hiker who was walking on Trail 5, he saw a bakri ka bacha. He saw a little goat, and he thought, "Oof, kitna zulm hai, I mean, oof, terrible. This little animal is here." He didn't realize that this barking deer had just been born, and the mother is close by. So in being a very kind human being, he picked it up and he brought it to our office. And I mean, we were in tears. What have you done? But the guy felt that, oh, how can this survive? But he didn't realize that the minute he took it out of that mosaic, that's the end of the life. So we immediately, for 3 full days and nights, we went back to look for the mother, because we knew that the mother will be crying for this child to give it back. But it was too late. I mean, we cared for it for many months. We tried to send it back. It's an amazing experience to try to, an effort, try to put that piece back in the mosaic, but it doesn't work. It's very, very difficult.
So in this case, it's a little bit of misplaced kindness. I mean, the intention was good, but just the lack of awareness and understanding.
Yeah.
But to go back to the question, can we rethink the Islamabad Zoo? Is that possible?
Yeah, so the thing is that this is exactly what I was coming back to, that now the new vision, the Ministry of Climate Change is leading this vision. Now this vision is the 2020 vision. You see, there was an extensive planning done in 2008 and 9, and a lot of money was spent, international people came in, but that was the 2009 and 10 design. This is going to be 2020. This is going to be the design of 2020, where you have very enclosures, where animals can be together, and the least space is not for animals, it is for the human beings. So the largest spaces are for animals, big enclosure, very little piece. That's number one. Number two is, like I talked about this mosaic, we have decided that there will be no more animals that will be brought in from outside. All local animals that this zoo had, they will come back. And you see, throughout the year, the Wildlife Management Board, the staff goes and we capture animals that are in captivity with people. So whether they are turtles or they are pangolins or they are scorpions or they are snakes or they are tigers or leopards, so whatever it is, those things, once they are out, they cannot go back. So we need a place to keep them. That will be this large enclosure where we will keep these places. So this is the vision of the new Islamabad Zoo.
Okay, could I just ask another question here? Because I know that 44 animals were taken to the Rawalpindi U Park, which is a much larger area as well. What animals, local animals, so sort of, indigenous animals are you going to be bringing to the Islamabad Zoo as per the Vision 2020?
It's actually whatever has gone is going to come back. Everything that has gone, everything that has gone from this zoo, except for the two beautiful lions that lost their lives and the one elephant, everything else is going to come back. Everything is, so it's been given on loan to the other locations only till this location is prepared and everything will come back.
Do we have a timeline on when this will be prepared?
We are hopeful that it will be done within a year.
Okay. All right. So Dr. Amir, I'd like to come to you because we've talked about advocacy, we've talked about rights, and I'd like to go back to the question of law as well. But I think that interesting incident that Dr. Anis cited as well, where there was a lot of kindness and care, you actually don't, I mean, it's very unfortunate, but we've seen the treatment of animals in Pakistan streets as well, stray dogs and cats. People encourage culling, for instance. How can we be better? How can we raise awareness better?
Thank you for the question. Also, thanks to Dr. Anis and to Arieb and all the attendants. I think Kaavan done a big job. The message of Kaavan raised a lot of awareness, not only in Pakistan, also outside Pakistan. A lot of nations start to reconsider how they care for animals, a lot of zoos. So awareness is the first step, and this is sure depend on the media. And it's not, we cannot separate animal and the human. We speak about not human and animal. It's a matter of humanity. I think the awareness should spread more about humanity, about kindness. This is more important. A kind person, as I mentioned all the time, should be kind not only to human, he should be also kind to animal and to the nature. So I think awareness is very important, how to go and how to have qualified staff. I think this happens by training, by education. It should be taken serious to deal with wild animal. It should be qualified staff who is able to deal with wild animal. The animal have also requirement like human. You need a species appropriate place. Elephant, which is huge, he need enough food on daily basis. He need enrichment. So to keep an animal, at first we need to know how to care for this animal, that he's able to enjoy his life and to be ambassador. So the first thing, if I take the American ambassador in Pakistan or in Vienna, they have nice residence, nice place, nice office, because he is the ambassador of his nation and we have to respect him. But if I take the ambassador from the jungle, he deserves also to have a nice place for him. This elephant or the lion, he's the ambassador of the jungle. He deserves a place to be appropriate for his species requirement. And I think this is important. Education is very important. Qualified and expert staff should be important. And here our future generation, the children, will learn more about animals, will learn more from animals. So I think it's very important what you mentioned about awareness. Thank
you. All
right.
Daniyal, I'd like to come back to you because, I mean, we do have a landmark precedent-setting judgment from the Chief Justice of the Islamabad High Court. One question about jurisdiction. I mean, wouldn't the Constitution need to be interpreted by the Supreme Court, for instance, to be applied across the country? One. Number two, do you think it also means that we actually need to revisit or at least create new laws in terms of animal rights?
So before answering both the questions, I'd like to point out the answer to your earlier question. Lawrence Tribe is a professor at Harvard Law School, and he, in his amicus brief, cited this judgment of Chief Justice Atta Minallah before the New York Supreme Court. And while I was, reading up on that, I also came across a statement from the Supreme Court of Canada, which says that Chief Justice Athar Minallah has taken a small step, which is a giant leap for these living creatures, also called animals. So, I mean, as Pakistanis, I feel, I feel proud that we've contributed to the international legal fraternity and the rights discourse. So now coming to your question, jurisdiction, this is a very important question because I was asked very recently by a friend when the issue of the bears in Karachi Zoo came up, that, why are they violating a judgment of the court? So the judgment of the Islamabad High Court, it only applies to the territorial limits of the Islamabad Capital Territory. The reason being that Islamabad High Court is not a federal court. Its territorial jurisdiction is limited to the Islamabad Capital Territory. For the judgment to apply uniformly across Pakistan, it will have to be cited by the Supreme Court of Pakistan. Alternatively, it can be adopted by the the other four provincial high courts in any case that comes before them. And I think the tide is going in the direction where sooner rather than later, this judgment will become precedent and will become law of the land. Your second question on laws regarding animal rights. I mean, the Wildlife Management Board ordinance is from 1979, and it's been now 40 years. We've not been able to update that law as such, and our laws are massively lacking on the rights of animals. And there are so many other ancillary issues. For instance, stray dogs. Now, this issue is there across the big cities of Pakistan, and as it happens, we're taking stopgap measures. We have knee-jerk reactions to these issues, but there is no permanent solution. And I mean, as humans, we end up acting barbarously towards animals. So, I mean, stray dogs, yes, they are a nuisance, but can you shoot them at sight? Definitely not. There has to be a mechanism whereby it needs to be understood why does the population of stray dogs keep on increasing, and rather it has been increasing exponentially over the past few years. So we have to identify the root cause and then gradually come to a solution. And that is supposed to be done by the executive and wildlife management boards across the country, not just Islamabad and Dr. Anis. And secondly, the provincial assemblies as well as the parliament, which includes the National Assembly as well as the Senate, needs to think and legislate. But before adopting any legislation on animal rights, there has to be a consultation with all stakeholders, and I would say a wider consultation with the general public, because this legislation is not for today or only for the coming 10 or 20 years. It's for a lifetime.
I think, Dr. Anis, if you could answer that question about updating the laws. We have an ordinance from 1979. We need to involve stakeholders, provincial governments, assemblies, perhaps. Could you explain the 1979 ordinance a little bit? I don't have it in front of me, so I haven't checked it, but what is lacking, what we need to do?
Ma'am, the 1979 Islamabad Wildlife Protection Ordinance actually primarily relates to the establishment of the Margala Hills National Park. And under the rules of that ordinance, so that ordinance actually basically talks about that you this area that is defined, number one, and number two, it tells you cannot remove, you cannot cut the trees, you cannot kill wildlife, you need to protect this area. So this is what that's it. The rules then go along with this law, and they state that to manage this, you need a wildlife management board that will have so many members. And what it would do is that it has got 3 schedules. Now, those schedules talk about wildlife. So that says that there are certain animals that you can hunt in the capital territory. There's a long list of them. It's usually migratory waterfowl that you can hunt, which we think is completely wrong and it has to be repealed. But anyhow, that is number one. The second thing is the trade of wildlife. And the third is things you cannot hunt at all. That is pregnant females of any variety, and that is the young of any animal. And there's a long list, okay, which is bears and so on and so forth. So these things you cannot hunt. So this is
bears and lions and tigers. Oh my!
So all those things you can't hunt. So then, but you see the procedures that are involved. So you need there are penalties in here. So those penalties have to be revised, number one. Number two is it relates to who has the authority to do it. That has to be revised. So it's really archaic. I mean, 40 years for a law is very old. The word environment wasn't even there, so environment isn't something so new. So all those things that relate to clean air and clean water and in the national park, these things all have to be brought into the law, for which we have already submitted the new law to the government, and they are already working on it.
Okay, so it is in the process. Oh, that's really great news. I think we also have quite a few questions, and I'd like to get back to those. Arieb, final thoughts, because we want to.
I just like to. I think what Dr. Amir said beautifully, that animals in a zoo-like situation should be an ambassador of their species, and I'm so happy to hear about this project of Dr. Anisa Rehman has mentioned about keeping local animals that have been rescued. So to turn this space of the Islamabad Zoo into a place where local animals that have been harmed can be rehabilitated. And I think it's an opportunity to really teach young people, to bring school children not to come and look at a wild animal behind a cage, but to come and learn what this animal is, what makes this animal happy, what this animal likes to eat, what this animal likes to do with their time, and to really have this connection. Because, I think that the human race throughout the world has been behaving barbarically and violently towards animals and towards each other. And I think the reason for that is fear, because violence always stems from fear. It's about a fear from nature. It's a fear from the other. And to get rid of that fear, you have to first understand the other. So in this case, to understand wild animals and to understand what makes them tick, and that will do away with the fear, and I believe that will do away with the violence, and that will bring us in line with where the whole world is inevitably headed now, because now we firmly realize that the future of our planet is at stake.
I think what's really important here, and it's really key, is that children are just naturally compassionate, and if you're able to, you take them to zoos, but again, there's that distance. The animals are behind cages, and as Dr. Anis so beautifully put it, I mean, in terms of rethinking the Islamabad Zoo, where people or human beings have a more limited space than the animals would. But it's really, that's where it begins. When we talk about awareness, when we talk about and going forward advocacy, it is actually to begin with children when they interact with animals. That's how it begins. We have a few questions as well. One of the questions is for Dr. Amir. And it is, so who is funding Kaavan's, I really would like to call it immigration or migration, and is there any way to contribute if there's need for more funds?
Thank you for the question. It is, I would say, a partnership cooperation between Free the Wild, which is headed by Share, and for Paws International. We cover the cost of the relocation of Kaavan. Regarding the relocation of the Himalayan brown bear and the rest of the animals at the zoo, this is for Paws International, or covering the cost of the relocation of the animal.
Okay, and what are the estimation?
The estimation for the animals, which we done in Pakistan, together with the support with Dr. Anis and his team, this was, I would say, acceptable cost, because it was done in national level with the relocation. We took the cover cost of the medication and all this, and the expert, which was in a reasonable cost. But sure, the relocation of Kaavan, this will be expensive experience due to the price of the airplane. But also we depend on our donors who support such mission. So the donors support such mission and such cost, which could be really, I will say, some over 200,000 to 300,000 euro or more even.
Mm-hmm. We're getting a few questions about laws as well. So I'm going to ask, I don't know, Daniyal, if you could answer it. Anybody could answer it because I don't know the answer. Is one allowed to kill an animal except for butchers? There's also another question about whether it's permissible to give poison to animals. So,
sorry, to give what into animals?
Whether you can give poison to animals, whether that is also illegal.
I think as for hunting, we have a special regime and we have special permits. So as a general rule, no, you cannot go on hunt any animal as you wish. Dr. Anis is an expert and he knows a lot more specifics on what are the limits on hunting. But as per my understanding, there are limits and there are permits issued especially for those species which are endangered, like the Hobora bustard bird.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I think this is a question that I would like all of you to answer if you want, or whoever wants to answer. It's Zara Hajiani, I believe. And she's asking about, you talked about culling dogs. And that's been a huge issue. I mean, there was a lot of talk about, for instance, in the media as well, rabies and dog bites in Karachi and what to do. And I know that there's also some great organizations that were trying to rescue and save the dogs as well. So what is the solution here? Who would like to answer this question about dog culling?
Can I just make a statement, and then if someone else wants to say something else about dog culling, I just like to say that there are examples of people befriending street dogs. Street dogs become wild and become hostile to humans because they have experienced so many times in their lives that every human that passes by tries to kick them or tries to throw a stone at them. So obviously they are hostile. But the moment that they encounter love and kindness from a human being, they change their behavior towards human beings. So there are many instances where street dogs, where people living in neighborhoods have started caring for those dogs, have started feeding those dogs, that those dogs actually become the chowkidars, become the guards of that neighborhood, and they protect the people who live in those houses. So this is something that I think definitely needs to be explored. As I said before, we have to learn to coexist with all the other species on our planet.
Just I want to add a sort of quick personal anecdote about this, because in my old house in G93, and if anybody who's familiar with Islamabad would know where that is, near Karachi Company, my children had adopted a stray dog. And for a couple of years, she would come and they'd named her and they'd play with her and sometimes be scared of her, but they would feed her and befriended each other. But suddenly she stopped coming and we just found out that she had been culled. And I never actually told the younger children in the house, because we lived in a joint family, because it would have been so devastating to find out what had happened to her. So just on a personal note, so dog culling solutions.
You see, what I've learned from in the last few months, actually, because I deal with wildlife and we don't deal with these street animals at all, but because this was a responsibility given to us by the Islamabad High Court. So I learned a lot from Dr. Amir, Khalil, who does this on a big time international scale, on a countrywide scale in many countries. But there's a big program going on in Karachi at the moment. As we know, Aisha Chundrigar runs a program for street dogs and cats and other animals also. She has a very successful program. The other hugely successful program is being run by the Indus Hospital. Now, the Indus Hospital, what happened is it's a free hospital, and they were getting a lot of dog bite cases, rabies cases. And they realized, okay, up till when are we just going to treat the people? So they decided that we need to go where the problem is. So in the two large localities close to the hospital, they started the program. And this is being led by the consultant who is an infectious diseases consultant. She leads the anti-rabies program on dogs. And they have realized that, you cannot, culling dogs is not an answer to the problem. In any space, there are certain amount of dogs or cats that live, as stray dogs. Now, these are not feral. Feral become wild. These are stray dogs that live in human with human interaction. So they said that the way to deal with it, and this Amir, Dr. Amir will tell you more about this than I know, is that you need to, it's a capture, vaccinate, neuter, and release program. So what you do is you send your team out and they have veterinarians or veterinary assistants with them. You catch the animal, you vaccinate it, anti-rabies vaccine and a health vaccine, and then you kill the animal or spay the female, and then you release them. So they go back in the same space where they came from. Their temperament gets much better than before, and people are used to those dogs. Like Arieb said, you know, that they become chokidars for you. They care for you because you care for them. So this is the way to look forward to it.
Dr. Amir, could you also talk about the solutions being found in Karachi and maybe just international best practice again?
Stray animal is not a problem in many countries. In Europe, even like in Italy, in Greece, there is a stray animal. The problem sometimes is not the stray animal, but the huge number of stray animal on the street, which may create problems for the citizen. Solution of this problem should be a humane solution. As Dr. Anis mentioned, the best way is to catch this animal, to neuter them, to vaccinate them, to mark them. I mean, identify this animal with some collars on the neck, and reintroduce them back to the same street. Why we have to bring the animal back to the street? In Egypt, for example, where I born, over 50 years they tried to solve the problem by killing the dogs, and they never solved the problem in Egypt. Why? Because if you take some animal from a street and you kill them, it becomes like a empty apartment. The neighbor animals from the neighbor street will come to occupy the street. So you don't solve the problem. But by castrating the animal and bringing them back to the same street, so it takes a normal average 3 to 4 years till the problem is solved, and you have to vaccinate the animal. And by this way here, you solve the problem of death of human being by rabies, which is a fatal disease 100%. There is no treatment. The only way is vaccination. So I see a humane approach is problem. It is scientifically approved method to solve the problem in the long term. It is efficient and cheaper. To neuter an animal is cheaper than to kill an animal. And we speak about a message with the first message, don't kill. It is a problem. We have to solve it. And this is not only one organization and one person, but as you mentioned before, awareness. To make awareness, we've done this in many nations, in Bulgaria, in Romania, in Greece, in many nations in Macedonia, where we announce to the citizen, there is a mobile clinic will come, there is a team will come, please help us to catch the animal, to vaccinate them, to castrate them, and bring them back. And this is raise the awareness. And the best soldier was for us all the time the children. They love animals. It is not humane to show kids how animals are poisoned or killed, which is more expensive, and it's not humane, and it's not solving the problem. Castrating the animal, vaccinating them is a solution.
All right, thank you. A few more questions. I'm just going to ask the panel, whoever would like to answer. For instance, Ruxana Barchas has raised an issue. She said communities give poison, and this was the poison question, perhaps I misunderstood. Give poison to snow leopards just to save their farm animals. Is this true to any extent? Dr. Anis?
Yeah, this is true. This is true because you see what I think the perspective that you have to look at here is that the snow leopard only lives in the northernmost part of Pakistan, which is a very deprived area. So people are very poor who live there, and their wealth is their animals, the cattle and the goat and the sheep that they have. That is their wealth. Now, that is the first thing to understand. The second thing to understand is the habit of this animal is that when it enters a corral, which is the area where you keep your domestic goat and sheep for the night, it will probably go in and it will kill everyone over there. It is not going in to have a meal. It enters with the intention of a meal, but the amount of the fear that it creates, it gets so disturbed that it will actually go and kill all the animals that exist in that corral. So that family is actually ruined. So for this, people have devised insurance schemes, that these people have to pay into, so that if you lose animals, you lose everything. You will lose everything when the snow leopard comes. So this compensation packages are a part of a government program, which is still in its very infancy, really. So therefore, when people know that there is a snow leopard or in a lower elevation, a leopard in our area, they will want to go and kill that animal because it's going to drop them down in poverty like anything else. So that is the answer to your question. That is why people actually will either poison it or they will kill it or shoot it.
It's hard to strike that balance where you feel compassion. Obviously, you have to find that balance between the concerns of people living there and who obviously their farm animals are their lifeline, as well as preserving wildlife as well. There's another question here: dog fighting, even cockfighting, is violent. Is there any punishment?
Well, I'm not aware of punishment, but it is illegal. You cannot do it without the permission of the district government. And I mean, gone are the days when such shows would be organized and they would be well attended by politicians as well as officials from the district government. So they're illegal.
All right. I won't be taking any more questions because I had a very special request, and Arieb, that's for you. If you could sing "My Way" for us.
Only if Dr. Amir sings it with me.
Dr. Amir, you have to join in. You have to join in.
I will follow you.
And now the end is near. And so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll say it clear. I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full. I've traveled each and every highway and more, much more than this. I did it my way.
Fantastic. And that's dedicated to Kaavan. And that brings us to the end of this session. I just want to thank all the participants, Daniyal, Dr. Anis, Dr. Amir, Arieb. This has been fascinating. I mean, I thought I knew a few things as a journalist, but I learned a lot today. And I'm hoping that this will be a starting point to sort of a more humane approach to animals and zoos and just, kindness. I mean, that's what we need to remember, whether it's humans, any living being. So kindness is a thing that we need to remember. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.